Sat Sri Akal, my name's Amma. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking about blame and how this concept is very prevalent amongst many societies, especially within the Desi community. In Desi culture, it's very common where individuals will blame others to deflect the actual issue off them to make it seem like it's someone's fault because they don't want to take the accountability in the first place, or to uphold social or family expectations. This practice of blaming others obviously creates a lot of tension or upset amongst societies and families. I also understand that sometimes individuals can struggle with self-blame because of the pressure of trying to uphold this image of whatever it is that they've created in their head or whatever their family or their society thinks of them. So it's easier just for them to not take accountability to make them look like the better person. I also think it's very important to recognize this topic. I don't think it's spoken about enough, and I have a lot of firsthand experience from it, hence why I do want to talk about it. I think the more we can empathize and have open communication about taking accountability and knowing not to blame others for the sake of blaming others, it's just better to have open communication, have a healthy environment where you can accept you've made a mistake or seek the support and help that you need and be able to take accountability rather than just blaming others. To begin with is my dad. Our relationship initially was not great and then got better and we were doing so well. And then if you've heard a couple of my recent episodes where me and my dad have been having a little bit of conflict and it's been really difficult to deal with. And from that, I realized that suddenly everything feels like my fault. And to add a little bit more context, when I decided to leave home, that automatically meant that everything that went wrong within my family from before, during, and after was automatically my fault. This is actually very common within my culture, not only with my experience and my circumstances, but when a Desi person decides to do something that's a little bit out of line or seen as a little bit dangerous or something that our society wouldn't accept, suddenly everything is their fault. And it's just not a way to live. And it is so taxing for my mental health. It's very much where, from the point where people start talking and the chat show aunties start gathering and asking questions, and, you know, my parents are being questioned as to, oh, why did your daughter leave home? And they have to answer or, be put in a position to feel like they have to answer. It's very much, we don't know what happened. She wanted to leave. She wanted her freedom. And we didn't do anything wrong. And all of these accusations, maybe because of the lack of emotional maturity, those people or those chat shit aunties won't have the capacity to think, maybe we should hear her side of the story, or to ask me directly. It's very hurtful and also a little bit demeaning as well, because they just believe what the person in power would say, which is my parents. And I just kind of get left with the blame of, oh, well, she left because she's off the rails. But the actual reason I left was to protect myself and escape a abusive environment. Also, from my experience, I've learned that the idea of abuse is very toxic within our community. I think it's not seen as what it is. And my definition of abuse would be very different to what a chat shit auntie would see as abuse. So, for example, my idea of abuse is if someone's speaking to me in a demeaning tone or if something gets physical. But I've had auntie say to me that, well, what did you expect? Look at how you act. It was your fault. If you didn't act the way you did, I wouldn't have gotten hit. And it even saying it out loud is very insane. But abuse within the Desi community is such a touchy subject. And I think that parents are seen to have this sort of authority and this power where they can do whatever they want to their kids because they're their parents and they will always be right, when that is so messed up. And that person, be it a child or an adult child, hasn't got a lot of power to speak up for themselves. And when they do, they get in trouble for it or are blamed for everything and seen as the black sheep. The weird thing about blame within our community as well is that if I've decided to do something drastic for myself, i.e. move out, it doesn't only get blamed onto me, but it has a domino effect on my siblings and like my close family, which is very weird. And this is definitely not spoken about enough. So, for example, in the future, when my brother decides to get married, he's seen as, I guess, tarnished. I don't know if that's the right word, but a bit like, oh, can't marry into that family because his sister left kind of thing. And it's so disgusting because the reason I left home had nothing to do with him. I did it for myself to protect myself. So to have this domino effect on my brother, who had nothing to do with it, is also a very common thing, that if one member of the family steps out of line, it affects everyone. And I think it really screams emotional immaturity. Me and my brother never really had the best relationship, and I was okay with it. Like, it was okay. But since I left, it only got worse, and we don't really speak, which is very unfortunate. I did talk about this earlier in one of my episodes, but because I left, again, I get the blame that it didn't work out because I left. And I might be wrong. I don't know what he thinks of me or what his thought processes are. And I'm sure he's had it difficult as well after I left, because when one person out of the family leaves, you're going to miss that person, and there's a complete shift in the dynamic of that family. But again, my brother doesn't really seem to like me, and I'll never know why until the day I do. But again, it really does feel like it's all my fault and I'm blamed, and it's not a nice feeling. The other day I was talking to my best friend Jess, and I was like, Jess, do you reckon like my parents actually sometimes feel guilty and really understand that they've gone wrong? And she was like, nah, Amma, they really don't. She turned around to me and looked me dead in the face and said that, Amma, fundamentally your parents are good-hearted people, they're genuine, but because of the education or lack of education and the time they were brought up in, they cannot comprehend the concept of accountability. And at any point, their brain thinks, maybe, just maybe, I've gone wrong for about 30 seconds. Their brain suddenly tries to validate it and think, actually, no, I'm fine. I didn't do anything wrong. And their way of apologizing is either just feeding me food or buying me things and just suddenly being nice, which is so messed up and creates a lot of confusion. So overall, the point I'm trying to make is that when someone in the Desi community decides to take a decision for themselves, which is not in line with what our society or culture deems as good, they're suddenly seen as the bad person and is blamed for everything. That is obviously not the case for everyone, but it's very common and has definitely happened to me. Before going to point fingers or making a judgment of someone's life, why don't you just ask them directly? I would rather just someone come to me and be like, hey, Emma, like, what happened? Are you okay? Talk to me. Why did you leave? And so on, rather than making assumptions and just believing one side of the story. It's better to just be more open-minded and have that space to have those conversations and take the accountability as well to, say that you messed up or whatever it is, without suddenly just blaming that person for making a decision that doesn't agree with you. I'm very glad that I speak about my life on this podcast and very vocal about sticking up for myself. So all these years that I felt like it was my fault for leaving home and that I did something wrong, it took me a very long time to heal and unlearn that, to understand that maybe I didn't do anything wrong. Sure, I could have conducted myself better in some situations, but I was in a place of survival. No person wants to be unstable. I don't like paying rent. I don't want to have to worry if I can feed myself. For the fact that I had to do that, it says a lot. And it took me so long to finally forgive myself for blaming myself and understand that I was only protecting myself. And by no means am I trying to explain myself here, because I couldn't even care for it. So if any of you aunties are listening and thinking, oh, blah, 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 fuck, I wish I could put that in, but no. The last time I truly felt relaxed was last year, June, and we're now in April 2024. So it's been a while since I've felt relaxed. I'm extremely burnt out, and it's because of work. And I feel like I'm so busy that I don't have the time to even process what's going on in my brain sometimes. So I'm glad I do this podcast and have a minute to myself. Also, in terms of my health, I'm doing a lot better. I'm fueling my fundamentals in the sense of my food, my gym. I'm journaling a lot more. I even journaled for this episode. So It's been extremely healing. And that brings me to the end of this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been taking the time out to intentionally plan my future episodes, and the topics I've chosen are very personal to me and will help you to get to know me as well as learn more about my society, the things we need to work on and do better, as well as some of the things I've learned. So I'll see you guys very soon. I thank you for watching. I thank you for listening. Dhanyavad. Sat Shri Akal. Bye.